The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Khalees Smith. Later in the show, Congressman McGovern weighs in on the situation in Gaza.
And Mary Tamer for Democrats for Education Reform on why her organization thinks the controversial MCAS test should remain a graduation requirement in Massachusetts.
But first, more big news in the local music scene. October 12th, 2023. I can't believe you're making me do this. Dateline Northampton.
Well, I was going to make them do a dramatic reading of the press release, but you talked me out of even pitching it.
I know.
Take two.
It's okay. Signature Sound Presents has announced the sale of the Green River Festival to leading Western Massachusetts concert promoter DSP Shows. DSP has signed a 5-year lease to keep the beloved genre-spanning festival at the Franklin County Fairgrounds. 2024 will mark the festival's 37th year.
And joining us is the founder of Signature Sounds, Jim Olsen, and partner and talent buyer for DSP Shows, John Sanders. Congratulations to you both on this big concert news in an era of lots of changing and moving pieces in our local concert scene.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
John,
you very much.
And that's Jim. So, Jim, we broadcast live for the first time ever, actually, even being involved with the festival for 20-plus years with our previous radio station where this festival was born. But tell folks who may not remember where the Green River Festival came from.
The Green River Festival started way back in 1986, somewhere in the Reagan administration, when fledgling Greenfield-based radio station WRSI, now known as 93.9 The River, decided to have a 5th birthday party. So I myself and a few other folks who worked at the station, we'd never done this sort of thing before. We put together a little party with NRBQ and a band that was unknown at the time called 10,000 Maniacs. And the late, great Ed Vadas and his fabulous heavyweights. And we threw a little party on the lawn at Greenfield Community College.
And the rest is history. It then gets taken over by the Franklin County Chamber of Commerce, but still produced in large part by you, who had left WRSI and started your own record label, Signature Sounds. So you are, the spiritual musical heart of this festival for the entirety of its history.
I've curated the lineup every single year since the beginning.
And now it will move on to DSP Shows. John Sanders from DSP Shows, tell us why this is something that you, who have a history with the music scene in Northampton for a long time with the Iron Horse Entertainment Group prior to working with DSP Shows, why was it something that you and DSP wanted to take over?
Well, Jim will tell you that, I approached him, a few years ago and said, if you ever want to move on, please let me know. I'm very interested. The Green River Festival to me is the ultimate live music event in Western Massachusetts, and Jim has done an incredible job of creating this community of music lovers who show up and support the music, who volunteer, and the artists who play there. And it's just this incredible vibe. I've been to it. I've been going to it since 2001, I think was the first year that I went, when my friend Aaron McKeown played on the festival. And, with my history in Western Mass and promoting shows, when I was working for the Iron Horse Entertainment Group at the Iron Horse in Calvin and Pearl Street and Pines Theater in Mountain Park, and now with DSP Shows, where we do shows at the Academy of Music, the Pines Theater, the Drake, Great Gateway City Arts, maybe someday soon the Iron Horse again. It really fits well with who we are and what we do and the music that we like and the community that we feel like we're a part of in Western Mass. And I'm really, really excited about it. I haven't been this excited to work on something in a very long time.
We got to see you floating around at the festival this year, backstage and at some of the stages. How do you feel about where it was when you saw it the first time and where it is now?
Meaning Greenfield Community College versus the Franklin County Fairgrounds.
Well, we're not... Yeah, okay.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you mean?
That's not what I mean.
Oh, what
I
did
just
you mean
the
then?
festival in general.
Oh, okay.
Like, things change over the years. When you see it the first time, it's different from when you see it, like, the 20th time. So How do you feel about where it is now and where you want to take it?
I think that the festival has grown tremendously. Jim can talk more about the kind of the milestones of like when it became 2 days and 3 days and when camping was added. And really it has grown organically as the demand for the festival has grown. I think that the festival, first of all, I love the Franklin County Fairgrounds. I think that it's an incredible place to do this festival. You feel the history of the community coming together in this space as they have for 150 or more years to celebrate and to mostly agriculture, but now there's this community celebration of music that happens in this space, and it just feels really good to have it there. I think that the layout is incredible at the fairgrounds. I think that we're not going to change a whole lot, and we're just going to try and keep doing it the way that has been done.
Talk a little bit about the move from where it started at Greenfield Community College to the fairgrounds, which I know a lot of old school Green River Festival fans will never get over, but that ship has essentially sailed, right?
It has indeed sailed. It has indeed sailed. We love doing it at the college. The whole thing with the hot air balloons was very magical and wonderful. But as festival promoters, as the people who are being entrusted to keep this thing safe and a great experience for everyone. It was a tough place to actually produce a festival. There is just no infrastructure out there. So when 2020 came along, we had every intention in 2020 of continuing on at Greenfield Community College. And then, of course, we all know what happened. The pandemic hit, and when we wanted to come back in 2021, we didn't want to take 2 years off between festivals. We felt like it could be done safely in 2021. The college wouldn't allow it. And so we moved the whole thing to the Franklin County Fairgrounds, where we had just been doing the camping piece. And we realized just doing it that first time in 2021 that it's just a better venue all the way around. And so basically our decision was made for us. And I just want to say something about an event like this is it's been going for a long time, and it's going because it has evolved and changed over the years. And we got to a point with our Signature Sounds team where I feel like we took it as pretty much as far as we could take it. Mm-hmm. And we did the best we could with it. And now having a new team involved and wanting to take it to the next level is just great for everybody.
We're speaking with Jim Olsen of Signature Sounds and John Sanders of DSP Shows. DSP Shows has just announced that they purchased the iconic Franklin County Summertime Festival, the Green River Festival, from Signature Sounds.
Is Signature Sounds stepping away from the event entirely, or like consulting sort of? You both can talk about it and how that's going to work out.
They need us.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of institutional knowledge. This thing has a million moving parts that need to be worked through, and John and I are really having a good time actually working together on this transition, and making sure that it's going to be great. Signature Sounds will be a sponsor for years to come. I will be involved in my new role as Festival Grandpa.
I love it. Oh my God,
that's the best.
We're gonna call you that from now on, Festival Grandpa.
Yeah.
Festival Grandpa Jim.
That's right.
No matter when you,
it's a role you can really grow into over the years.
You're not going to be able to get away from it for anything else we bring you on to talk about.
Right.
You just need to be aware of that now.
Does that make John Sanders our festival uncle?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that too, kind of. John Sanders from DSP Shows. The press release says that you've signed a 5-year contract with the Franklin County Fairgrounds. That may leave people saying, well, then what happens? Do we know yet? Is it too early to speculate?
Well, I think that shows a commitment, actually. I don't believe that there was ever any contract longer than 1 year to do the festival. So I think that actually shows a commitment that we're planning on keeping this in Franklin County at the Franklin County Fairgrounds, and there is no intention or motive to ever move it away from there.
Yeah.
They're fantastic partners. I mean, from the minute we moved there, they couldn't be more accommodating, more helpful, and, just really wanted to make it work, and it certainly did.
You've also, with this announcement, just announced the dates for next year's festival all as well. So do you want to
Yeah, we're the third weekend of June, June 21, 22, and 23. And we've put some early bird tickets on sale right now at greenriverfestival.com.
We're not allowed to say prices on public radio. Did you know that?
But it's always better to get it earlier rather than later.
But we can say that it's going to be cheaper now than it would ever be. So if you're one of those people that knows you're going to go no matter what, you'd almost be silly not to. But all that being said, anything we can disclose, a little titillating tidbit about what the future of this, at least first incarnation of the DSP version of Green River has?
Because, this is happening, but the lineup, I know in the past has usually been, the big names for the lineup usually get announced in January, so this is a little early.
It's an early bird.
So, the thing about the fairgrounds versus the community college is that the capacity is bigger. We're kind of maxed out at 5,000 people at GCC, and now we have the ability to do more people, which in turn allows us to try and go after some bigger headliners. So that's definitely something that we're working on, and the hope is to have some headliners announced around Thanksgiving.
Wow, that's early for people.
That is early, and maybe we'll have you back when that happens, too. That's pretty exciting. Speaking with John Sanders from DSP Shows, who's now taken over the Green River Festival from Signature Sounds, and Jim Olsen. I'm imagining Jim, full disclosure, Khalees and I are very ensconced in this festival, as is NEPM, as is our old radio station, our alma mater.
Because we feel kind of the same way. There's something about this festival that is really kind of at the pulse of this region.
Oh, yeah. My kids have grown up going to this festival. It's a place where you could, as a parent, let your 6-year-old run wild and feel great about it. It is an important and huge and wonderful thing that you've created. I'm not going to cry.
Are you?
A little bit, maybe.
He's definitely going to cry.
I'm imagining, and I knew at the festival this year that this was very likely, if not definite, to be your last one. And I took this beautiful picture of you and your wife, Carolyn, under the rainbow that came at the very end of the Green River Festival this year, and it seemed like this was fate. But I'm imagining that this is a bittersweet decision as somebody who has curated this iconic festival for so many years.
To be honest with you, I thought it was going to be a lot more bittersweet than it is, mostly because...
It's just bitter. I knew it. You guys go at it. No, I'm just kidding.
No. We're not having a Green River Thunderdome here.
I'm not going anywhere, Monty.
Yeah.
I really look forward to the future of the festival. We carried the ball as far as we could. We're passing the ball along, but we're saying, I'm still going to be involved. And I think much of the team who's been producing it over the past few years is going to continue on. And I think it's going to be a pretty seamless transition. I'm excited to get my sleepless week back because it is a sleepless week, the week leading up to that festival. And yeah.
John Sanders, are you looking forward to your sleepless week that you have now inherited?
As the father of 2 young children, I know what sleepless weeks look like.
Thank you, Uncle Festival. Well, before we let you go, this is another piece of a major shakeup in the local music scene with the sale of the Iron Horse, with whatever is exactly going on with the Calvin Theater that isn't entirely clear yet. I'm not.
And frankly, the outright loss of Pearl Street.
And the Drake and Bombix and other venues in the area that have been or are relatively new. Do you feel hopeful about where the music scene is headed with all of these changes? Let's start with you, John Sanders.
I'm super hopeful. I'm ever an optimist, and I haven't stopped promoting shows in Western Massachusetts for the last 23 years. And so, when that transitioned to DSP, I didn't have certain venues at my disposal, so I made things work where I could, and I think that the Academy has become a really beloved place to see shows, and that really wasn't happening before 2015 when I started doing shows there. We revived a Pines series, a series at Look Park and at the Pines that is a place that I love doing shows at, and I know that the community loves seeing shows at, and that has really come back in full force. So I'm super optimistic. I think that the Iron Horse coming back is great news for music lovers and for Northampton. I booked thousands of shows in that room, and it's one of my favorite places to see a show, and I'm happy that I will get to see another show in that room.
Mm-hmm. Same question for you, Jim Olsen from Signature Sounds. You feel hopeful about where the music scene is headed here?
I'm super hopeful. It's amazing how we've come out of the pandemic with new venues and with all of these changes And it's part of what makes me comfortable passing this along, because I think we are about to hit another renaissance like we had in the late 80s, early 90s of the Valley music scene. You can just feel it coming. And it's a really exciting time.
So last question, like your unicorn get, the person that you'd love to see at the Green River Festival over the next 5 years.
John Sanders.
I don't feel comfortable answering that question because I'm trying to get that person right now, right?
Jim Olsen, who is your unicorn get that you didn't quite catch? I think I know who
Is
it
it still Billy Strings?
He was already
Billy
booked.
Strings was booked
Yeah.
in 2020.
He owes you a show.
Part of the ill-fated 2020 lineup, which was the best
It
lineup
was the best
we ever
lineup.
had.
It was such a good lineup.
He still owes us. I have a signed contract, Billy. Come on down. I'm very fortunate that I got to book so many of my favorites. A lot of legendary performers who have passed on got to play the Green River Festival. I'm so glad that we took the extra step to bring in people like Alan Toussaint and Charles Bradley and, legendary people who at the time people might have gone, who? But, in retrospect, really add to the rich history of the festival that they played the stage. Sharon Jones and the Tap Kings,
It's great, and I'm looking forward to the future. And I think personally, as somebody who's been involved with the festival for so long and has known John Sanders for so long, that this is a hopeful moment for this iconic festival.
Please let us still broadcast live.
Yeah, NEPM's usually a sponsor, so we would love to be still be involved. We're going to point blank ask you while you're live on the radio. John Sanders, who's now Uncle Festival of the Green River Festival, just announced today that it is Green River Festival has been sold by Signature Sounds and Jim Olsen to DSP shows. Jim Olsen, John Sanders, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Soon we'll explore the future of the MCAS in the Commonwealth with Mary Tamer of Democrats for Education Reform.
But first, we'll check in with Congressman McGovern about Speaker of the House madness, school lunches, and more.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's Jim McGovern, a segment we like to call McGoverning with McGovern, and there's been a lot of drama in the House of Representatives, as there has been for a bunch of weeks, but the majority of people who wanted to ask questions of you, Congressman, want to talk about your take on what's going on between the State of Israel and Hamas. Got an email from Josh Jacobson saying, Representative McGovern, I'm not one of your constituents. I'm originally from Westfield, though I now live in Agawam, and I am a worker, student, and educator. Will you second, or at least recognize, Rashida Tlaib's statement regarding the recent escalation in hostilities in this conflict in Congress? And for background, if you're not following this, Rashida Tlaib is the only Palestinian in Congress, as far as I know. Tlaib suggested withholding U.S. support to fund Israel's, quote, apartheid government, a commitment that infuriated some of her fellow lawmakers who found it offensive as the death toll there continues to rise. She also called the attack part of a resistance effort. The emailer, Josh Jacobson, goes on to say, her statement for a member of that body is incredibly empathetic, humanistic, and respectful despite the reactionary response it received. As a citizen of the Commonwealth, I hope, no expect, that you will defend your colleague against reactionaries within and without our government. What's your take first on your colleague's statements?
Well, I'm a ready to retire statement, but Rashid is my friend, and I defend everybody's right to say what they believe. She's a thoughtful member of the House of Representatives, and I share her view that the Palestinians deserve a homeland and that we ought to care about Palestinian human rights. So we agree on. I think where we disagree at this moment is in the sense that I do not believe that Hamas represents the Palestinian people, and I don't believe that Hamas's goal and their barbaric attack on Israel. I mean, it is ISIS-like, the attack. I mean, I've sat through a number of briefings, seen a number of videos and pictures about what has gone on, and it is reminiscent of the kinds of attacks that ISIS launched, killing babies and elderly people, and just, I mean, the brutality of the killing of itself. This was a targeted attack on Israel. Hamas's goal is not about uplifting the Palestinian people. Hamas's goal, and it's in its charter, and this is just a fact, is the destruction of the Jewish state, is the destruction of Israel. That is what drives Hamas. So, I think the pathway forward to help better the lives of Palestinians is going to be by getting Hamas out of the picture here. Hamas is not lobbying the world community for Palestinian rights. They're interested in the destruction of Israel. And so I think that's where I stand. And I've been very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and his government and their attempts not only at trying to ignore the Palestinian question, but also on their attempt to try to, overturn democracy within Israel. But we can't blur everything together. And I really believe that Hamas is goal here is one thing, and that is to destroy Israel. And I think the whole world is horrified by what happened, and let us hope we get beyond this, that we can get to a point where the world can get serious about trying to figure out how we can create an independent Palestinian state where the Palestinians have a future and don't have to live under the repression of Hamas.
Your colleague in the Senate, Senator Ed Markey, also a Democrat, was on Boston Common earlier this week denouncing what Hamas has done as a heinous attack, but then he's called for a de-escalation of the current violence. The Biden administration has sent one of our largest warships to assist in the Israeli effort to squash Hamas. There is likely to be a ground invasion very soon. People who are within Gaza are scrambling to try to find food and supplies before this ground invasion begins. When Ed Markey called for a de-escalation, a chorus of boos started to ring out in the middle of his speech. Is the Biden administration's support of what Israel is doing right now something that is dividing Democrats?
No, I mean, I think the issue now is whether Israel has a right to defend itself. I mean, that's the question. And they do. If we were attacked, we have the right to defend ourselves as well. The issue is how you proceed in that goal. Look, I think everybody would like to see an end to hostilities everywhere, right? I mean, but how do you end the hostilities and keep in place an apparatus that is aimed at your total destruction? I mean, that's the issue.
But the rhetoric coming out of Netanyahu's mouth is also total destruction at this point, and the U.S. is assisting in that total destruction. And
the U.S. has also cautioned Netanyahu about, reminded him about there are rules of war. There are things like international human rights standards, and that that attention needs to be given to doing everything you can to protect civilians. I've urged the Israeli government to stop the blockade of food and water into Gaza, because the majority of people who live in Gaza are children. To me, that is something that we should try to get them to reverse immediately. But the deal is that I think we have to separate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from what is happening right now, in the sense that Hamas's attack on Israel is not about the Palestinians or about a homeland or about even the horrific conditions in Gaza. Here's the other thing. The leaders of Hamas who are directing this horrific attack against Israel, they're in other countries right now in 5-star hotels doing press conferences and making themselves available on the internet to try to stir more and more hostility around the world. So, look, I have a long commitment to protecting and upholding the rights of the Palestinians. I will continue to do that. But I can't. I have a difficult time trying to say, well, therefore this attack is understandable. This is not about the Palestinians. Read the history of Hamas. Read their charter. They're exploiting the Palestinian people. And yes, we need to continue to press Israel to respect the human rights of the Palestinian people. Because if they don't, quite frankly, and if there's evidence of excesses in which Palestinian civilians are deliberately targeted, that will undercut the support for Israel internationally. There's the right thing to do morally. There's also the right thing to do politically.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, our regular Thursday chat, McGoverning with McGovern, this is a story that's only been breaking today, but comes from your district and has to do in no small part to anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, which plays into the Israeli-Gaza conflict right now. But earlier this morning, Demilitarize Western Mass created a blockade on Prince Street in front of L3 Harris, which is the local subsidiary of the 9th largest weapons manufacturer in the world. I think many people who live in Western Mass don't realize that there is this major weapons manufacturer in Northampton, of all places. They are risking arrest. One of our frequent questioners and joiners on the March for the Food Bank, Pocky Wieland, is amongst the folks who are there risking arrest right now to try to protest what's going on, particularly in this region, but with their role in violence abroad in places across the globe. What's your take on the fact that there is a weapons manufacturer of this scale in your district and the folks that are now creating this blockade and risking arrest?
Well, I appreciate nonviolent protest, and I've been involved in many protests myself over the years, some of which have resulted in my arrest. So I certainly respect people's right to do that. I'm somebody who routinely votes against the military budget because I think it is extravagant and out of control. And I'm someone who's also tried to restrain where the United States sends weapons around the world. I mean, we send weapons not just to allies, but we send weapons to thugs around the world. And those weapons are in turn used to invade other countries or to harm civilians. And so, I will watch this protest intently. I didn't know it was happening. You just informed me about it. And I love Pocky Wieland. And so I know if she's involved in this, that this is something that is important for all of us to pay attention to.
Pocky Wieland, for those who don't know, is part of every social justice organization that exists out there, Code Pink. I think she may be old enough to be one of the raging grannies at this point, but she's fallen in the footsteps of many of the social justice activists like Francis Crowe from this area.
Yeah. Pocky's one of my heroes, and I was just on a phone call, a Zoom call with her the other day, talking about how we overturned U.S. economic sanctions against Venezuela, which is resulting in incredible hardship for the Venezuelan people and is resulting in hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans leaving the country, trying to seek a better life, and coming to the United States as well. But she, on every good cause, Pocky is there. So I will follow this intently.
We might need to bail her out.
You got to bail me out of Washington first.
Oh, yeah, right.
I'm still stuck here.
Speaking of Washington, back to the boring stuff. What is going on in the House of Representatives? It looks like Steve Scalise has risen to the top of the charts, I guess, as the potential new Speaker of the House. Your colleague in Massachusetts from the 5th Congressional District, Catherine Clark, the minority whip in the House, wrote an article or a piece for the Boston Globe saying that now is the time to figure out how to work together with the Democrats, given the fact that we've talked about before, that the White House is controlled by Democrats, the Senate is controlled by Democrats. Tell us what we need to know about Steve Scalise as he is the likely next speaker.
Well, he's another right-wing Republican, but he's having trouble getting to the 217 votes he needs to become speaker. There's a civil war going on within the Republican Party, and I think really the most logical path forward is a bipartisan path. But so far, none of the Republicans who are running for speaker are interested in that. And again, whoever becomes the next speaker will be in the same situation that Kevin McCarthy is in. The Republicans, thanks to Kevin McCarthy, acquiesced to the hardline right-wingers and agreed to a rule that any one person can move to vacate the speaker's chair.
So that's not going away. Steve Scalise could be
No.
speaker for 15 minutes and do something that the hard-right Republicans don't want, and they'll call for a vote to his removal.
Right. Yeah, and they've all pledged to not change that rule, and the right wing has said we won't vote for anybody who changes that rule, and they said they won't vote for anybody who works with Democrats. So that's kind of where we are right now. The House Representatives is inoperable, and we are fast approaching another deadline in which the government will run out of money. We won't be able to even bring anything to the House floor for debate or vote because the acting Speaker pro tem has no power. The only power he has is to be able to oversee the election of the next speaker. So we can't even bring anything to the floor. If there was a natural disaster that hit the United States this morning, Congress would not be able to act to vote to appropriate money to respond to it in the afternoon. We cannot do a thing. So this is unprecedented. My hope is they can get their act together, but the easiest thing for them to do, the smartest thing for them to do, is to work with us on a bipartisan path forward. And I hope they'll do that. But if not, we're going to see this craziness continue.
Does it seem likely, given your knowledge of Steve Scalise over the years, that he will be more willing to work than, say, Kevin McCarthy was? Or is he still going to be as under the thumb of the Freedom Caucus, as they call themselves?
I think whoever is the speaker will be under the thumb of the Freedom Caucus unless they change that rule. And look, Steve Scalise, you can Google this, he's not a moderate by any means. I mean, he referred to himself as David Duke without the baggage a few years back. So that's kind of where he's coming from. So this is not like this moderate Republican. This is not like a Charlie Baker type of personality. Having said that, he is a much more pleasant person, just in conversation, than Jim Jordan is, and then Kevin McCarthy is, for that matter. But do I expect anything different? No. As long as this rule stays in place, the hardline right wing will call the shots. And if he doesn't jump when they tell him to jump, they will move to vacate the chair, and we'll be in this situation once again.
This week is National School Lunch Week, and I know, Congressman McGovern, you've been an anti-hunger advocate for such a long time, and we in Massachusetts have made free lunches available to all students, but you introduced a bill, the Healthy Meals Help Kids Learn Act, that would give more funding and opportunity to kids in school to eat fresh local ingredients in their breakfasts and lunches. Any possibility this National School Lunch Week that something like that will get any attention, or is Congress in such disarray that no one's ever even going to think about this bill again?
Well, we're going to try to make it so that people have to pay attention to it. Look, it is wonderful that Massachusetts joined a number of other states, and we now offer, free meals to all of our students in a school setting. That's an important step forward, and I'm grateful to the state legislature for doing this and the governor for signing it into law. But it is not just about making sure kids have a meal. It's what kind of meal they get. And again, we want more and more fresh produce. We want healthier meals in our schools, and we want, quite frankly, to give our kids the very, very best. And that's what the goal of this is. And, we have a huge number of incredible farms all throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, I would like to work more with them to make sure what they produce and what they grow on their farms gets into our schools, and our kids can enjoy good, locally produced, wonderful food. And that's what this bill is about. We're going to keep fighting it until we get it over the finish line.
Meanwhile, while Congress is in disarray, and that may take some time to get it over the finish line, there's stuff you can do locally. The March for the Food Bank signups are now up at the Food Bank's website, foodbankwma.org. The march will go from Springfield to Greenfield over 2 days, November 20th and 21st. I'll be there pushing an empty shopping cart alongside Andrew Morehouse, who's the executive director of the Food Bank, and U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, who's gone with us now, 9, 10 of these... of the 14 marches that we've done, something along those lines?
I've lost count. But again, I hope everybody will join us. It's not only for a good cause. It's a lot of fun, and really, especially with all the turmoil that's going on in the world, sometimes it's just good to be with good people who want to do good things, and that's the way I look at this march. There's a lot of good people in our community who want to help those who, quite frankly, struggle, and that's what this is about.
The theme this year is power of community, and it seems like it's a great way to gather together when you feel helpless, either in Congress or with global politics, to feel like you're actually participating in something to make the place where you live maybe just a tiny bit better. So I always appreciate that you come along on that, Congressman, and I'm getting my steps in already to get ready for this 43 miles. You don't have to do, listeners don't have to do the whole 43 miles. Neither does the Congressman, by the way, and his wife would love it if he didn't. I know. But
I just bought some new Hokas to
good.
Get through the.
Those are good. Those are good sneakers. Yeah, I'm. The theme this year for my dress up is it's a Barbie themed celebration of drag. So I'm going to be Ken one day, and I'm going to be Barbie the next.
I can hardly wait.
So get some pink. Get some pink and wear it. It'll be fun.
I'll see what I can find. But hey, one last thing before I go. If anybody who's listening has family or friends or loved ones either in Israel or in Gaza, and are concerned about their whereabouts, or if they know people that are trying to get to the United States from either place, please call my office, and we're happy to try to work to make sure that people get answers. And again, as this unfolds, I'm very, very open and interested in hearing what people have to say, and I want to hear what's on people's minds. So I hope people will stay in touch with me.
U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, taking your questions weekly here and has his office open if you have loved ones that are in the Holy Land right now that you're worried about. You can send your questions to him for this show at thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best. Be safe.
Up next, should the MCAS remain a graduation requirement for the Commonwealth? We'll explore the flip side of a question that may end up on the ballot for next year with Mary Tamer of Democrats for Education Reform.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We welcome Mary Tamer, who is the Massachusetts Director of Democrats for Education Reform. She is a longtime education advocate and Democratic activist who is a product of the Boston Public Schools, a former Boston Public Schools parent, a former member of the Boston School Committee, and a past president of the League of Women Voters of Boston.
And we're talking about MCAS and the Thrive Act, which is aiming to be on the ballot a year from this November. Mary Tamer wrote in a recent piece for the Boston Globe, quote, "The current state of education should affirm that..." Don't mess around with my script. You're blocking my script, Bart. Quote, "The current state of education should affirm that a common assessment measuring academic performance is an indispensable tool to ensure education equity and apply consistent standards. Instead, the very notion of statewide standards is currently under attack in the form of proposed legislation, the so-called Thrive Act, and a ballot question, both sponsored by the Massachusetts Teachers Association, seeking to weaken the state's long-standing accountability system."
She continues, the ballot question would not only eliminate 10th grade MCAS as a high school graduation requirement, but it would also require individual districts, more than 300 in all, to set their own graduation standards as long as they do not include a standardized test, rendering a diploma from Lexington to mean something quite different than one from Leominster or Lawrence.
Mary Tamer joins us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Listeners may remember in August we had the president of the Mass Teachers Association, Max Page, who is a Fabulous 413 resident in Amherst, talking about the Thrive Act and why his organization is backing it. Tell us why your organization, the Democrats for Education Reform, thinks that the MCAS should stay the way that it is.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because we, are a state that serves just shy of 1 million students. So we have about, I think, 913,000 students in our schools across the state. And one of the things that we know is that Massachusetts has been a leader, specifically since the 1993 Education Reform Law came into being, and basically not only paved the way for Chapter 70, which is the very complicated formula that we use to fund our schools, but also a new system of standards and accountability. And so we have seen tremendous gains in student achievement, in high school graduation rates since these new, measures, or not when they were new at the time, went into effect. And it's interesting. We recently had a call with, we were doing, our organization along with a statewide coalition of groups is looking at Mass Core standards here in Massachusetts, which are a recommended set of standards from the state, not required. But we've been talking to other states about what they're doing. And when we mentioned the Thrive Act and some of the activity around eliminating MCAS as a 10th grade graduation requirement, these folks in Indiana were like, oh my gosh, why would Massachusetts change anything? You all are the gold standard. We all look to you for what you're doing in terms of your education system and your standard setting. So I think that's a really good, measure when you talk to folks in other states and what they're wrestling with in terms of ensuring that a diploma means something, but also that students are getting exactly what they need so they're prepared for that next step, whether that step is college or career.
We got an email from a man in Greenfield who's a retired educator named Paul Jablon who wanted to put his take out there, and he said that he believes that corporations are behind this movement, that the corporations who create and grade these exams, the movement being MCAS itself, not the Thrive Act, who create these exams and whose profits have increased 5,000% since standardized testing has begun and don't want them to disappear. A lot of the critique has to do with your organization, has to do with funding. So talk about, we know the Mass Teachers Association is funded by teachers and union dues. Tell us about what your Democrats for Education Reform is, how that organization is funded.
So we are funded by individuals and donors, whether it's foundation donors from across the country, from the state. We're funded by the same folks who fund lots of different education groups. We have individuals who support the work that they do. I think really what's most important for me to mention is what drives me to do this work. And so I am, in addition to being, my kids did go through the Boston Public Schools, I'm also a Boston Public School graduate, as are my parents. My mom was an English learner. I come from a Middle Eastern family, and my mom was actually denied admission to the Boston Public Schools because she didn't speak enough English. And at the time, we didn't have laws to protect English learners. My older sister was a high school dropout because while I was fortunate to have teachers who supported me, and I was a low-income kid in the Boston Public Schools, my sister fell through the cracks of a system that at times is very broken. And so my sister missed almost a month of school, and no one ever called to say, your daughter's not coming to school every day, whereas I was in a school that if I missed even 2 hours of school, my parents got a phone call. And so when it comes to standards and accountability, what drives me to this work is that knowing 40 years after my own sister's experience that we see too many children who are falling through the cracks. So we can focus on funding organizations. I think what's most important is to focus on the children and people like me who go to work every day to make sure that every child in the state of Massachusetts gets what they need to be successful.
And I think we can all agree that the safety and education of our children is important. But if big corporate interests have been levied against your organization, say the Walton family behind Walmart or the Rupert Murdoch, if they are funding this organization, and it is not coming from, say, teachers, why are they vested in this as a movement? Why are they vested in other things that your organization has stood for, like charter schools, which in some ways take public funding out of the hands of a democratically elected school committee and put it into what can be conceived as private interests?
Well, so here in the state of Massachusetts, 74% of the families, for example, who support charter schools and send their children to charter schools are families of color. I do not believe that anyone should tell families of color where they can or cannot send their children to school. In Boston, it's 92% families of color who send their children to charter schools. Now, I know I have many wonderful friends who are teachers. I know teachers who send their children to private schools. If you're a poor mom living in Roxbury or Mattapan, often your only choice, other than a district school that might be not serving children as well as it could, is to send them to a charter school. And I believe that public school choice is a very important thing for all families to have, regardless of their income.
So, let's go back to the thing with your sister. Is there proof that MCAS makes up the difference in leveling this playing field for those kids who fall through the cracks? Like, does the MCAS actually make up that space?
It's supposed to. And so if we use MCAS as it is intended, which is as a diagnostic tool of telling us where children are and where they are not, we are fortunate to live in the state of Massachusetts where we have appropriated millions and millions of dollars through the Student Opportunity Act specifically to go to districts where children are identified as high needs, which means you have a higher proportion of students with disabilities, English learners, low-income students. That money is specifically targeted to go to those districts to help those students get the support that they need. Because one of the things we know is that talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. And so the question we should be asking is, what are we doing to make sure that all children are successful in getting the support they need, whether it's mental health support, whether it's academic tutoring, whether it's a longer school day or a longer school year. Here in Springfield, you all have used your ESSER funds to actually offer full-day programming. And it's not just academic, but enrichment programming for students for the last 2 summers. Brookline has done the same. All districts should be doing that because we know that these last 3 years of interrupted learning have taken a significant toll on our kids, both academically and mentally. And so my question is, at a time when we as a state came into $2.5 billion in ESSER and ARP funding from the federal government, specifically earmarked for our schools to recover, we have $1.2 billion of that money left. How are we spending that money, and how are we putting it to the kids that need it the most? We have more money in our districts right now than we frankly know what to do with. And the question is, what have we done differently? And in my estimation, we haven't done enough differently. We're doing the same old, and it's not serving our students.
We're speaking with Mary Tamer from Democrats for Education Reform about their organization's hope that the MCAS does not change, despite the fact that the Thrive Act may end up on the ballot a year from this November. We'll be back with more questions with Mary Tamer in just a little bit.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on NEPM.
Inside my head, and I never would have gotten out of bed.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This is Not a Test by Bikini Kill, and I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Khalees Smith.
And we're speaking with Mary Tamer from the Democrats for Education Reform about a test called MCAS and whether it should stay the way that it is or whether in the Thrive Act, potentially a year from November, it would be changed to no longer a high-stakes graduation requirement.
Right. And that's the thing that I wanted to bring up next, because we talked to Max Page again about this in...
President of the Mass Teachers Association.
Right. Who, at the time, said the thing that basically you just said in our last segment, that the MCAS should be used as diagnostic tool. But we haven't really gotten to why it should be the graduation requirement and why that separation is important.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question, Khalees. So what I would say is the test itself is supposed to be telling us whether the standards that are being taught to students throughout the year are resonating. Like, are those standards actually, is it something that they're learning? Like, we have a list of standards that, students, academic standards that we want students to learn in the different subject areas. And so are those lessons resonating or not? One of the things that we've heard and seen, and this came up, there was a hearing at the State House last week on the Thrive Act. We had a mom testify who said her son, for example, was getting all A's and B's at his lovely suburban Boston school. It wasn't until she saw his MCAS scores that she saw there was a significant disconnect between her son getting all A's and B's and the fact that his MCAS scores were showing that he couldn't read. And in fact, he had dyslexia. So how is it possible that this child was getting all A's and B's despite the fact that he couldn't read? And we see this in our high schools as well. We have ninth graders who are 2 to 4 grade levels behind. And so MCAS tells us what grades don't. And that's why it is one measure. It tells us something. It doesn't tell us everything, but it does tell us something important. And we believe asking students to meet a 10th grade standard before the 12th grade, even if they still have to take the test in the 12th grade, they're still being asked to meet a 10th grade standard. And that is a minimal requirement for any child who wants to go into college or career.
But what if the reverse is true? What if you're somebody who is very, very, very smart and gets all A's and B's, maybe because your teacher is assessing you constantly, but you're not great with tests, and then you don't pass this test? Shouldn't you be able to graduate? Shouldn't your teachers and your school district be the ones that say, yeah, you're a smart kid. You definitely deserve to graduate, even though you can't fill out this test?
So the reality is there's a process where families and students can appeal. So if for whatever reason there is a student who cannot pass the test, there's something called the EPP process. But there are avenues for students to appeal, for families to appeal. But what's really important to know is that we're talking about less than 1% of the kids who are graduating. We're talking about 700 students a year, and it's our opinion that those 700 students per year that are not graduating, I would love to know what supports were they given after they didn't pass in 10th grade, and then they subsequently didn't pass again in the 11th and 12th grade. What are we doing to make sure that all of our children are successful? And that is really the question here.
Couldn't in the 1 minute we have left, couldn't all the assessments be made without the graduation requirement, though? Couldn't all of the same data be there, but not the graduation requirement?
So the problem I would say to that, Monty, is here in Massachusetts, we have no set graduation requirements. And so Mass Course standards are a recommendation and not a requirement. So again, going back to my op-ed, I don't believe that we want diplomas to mean 300 different things in Massachusetts. I don't think having individual districts set expectations, some of which might be high, some of which might be incredibly low, is the way to go for our students. I think all of our students in Massachusetts deserve the best that we can give them, and MCAS is part of that.
Mary Tamer from the Democrats for Education Reform. If you missed the conversation with Max Page earlier this summer, you can hear it again this Saturday at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a conversation we can have over the course of the next year, it looks like.
And we will continue to have over the next year.
It certainly seems like we will.
Thank you.
Did you know that the national average of local food used by higher ed dining systems is only 3%.
But there's a local college that's grown its program to use 10 times that amount for its dining program.
Tomorrow on the show, we'll speak with Andy Cox and Germán Alvarado of Smith College about the strengths and challenges of getting students to eat local.
And the fellows of NEPM's Media Lab program worked all summer on the series Books for Young People, and we'll share that series with you.
Plus, we'll go to the Wine Thunderdome at Table & Vine and taste 2 Chianti Classicos.
With a special guest.
Special thanks to Spouse, Happy Valley Guitar Orchestra, Elin Jewell, the Jay Giles Band, Flaming Lips, Daniel Hales and the Frost Heaves, Bikini Kill, and She and Him.
Our director is Tony Happy Half Century Dunn.
Our engineers are Betsy Distance Bay Lankto, Phil, Mr. Meeples Bishop, Kara, the long arm of the show Foster, Bart, the penultimate board op standing Rankin, and Punk Rude Boy Sharp Cheddar Dubé. I'm Monty Belmonte.
And I'm Clee Smith. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
This is